Donna shared her living space with her husband, Walter, who had become increasingly domineering despite not working. Walter, a stay-at-home spouse, managed household duties while Donna worked to support them financially. Their arrangement was intended to provide stability, but Walter's controlling nature undermined Donna's efforts, making her feel her contributions were futile. One day, Walter declared with a smug expression that he would allow his parents to live in their house, suggesting that Donna could move in with her in-laws without her consent. Donna was stunned and speechless at his audacity, especially considering she owned the house. This incident was a breaking point for her, having tolerated Walter's overbearing attitude for too long. Walter often issued commands as if he were entitled to do so, once demanding Donna fetch him ice cream late at night while he relaxed, despite her exhaustion from work. When Donna suggested he could get it himself, Walter laughed and insinuated that upsetting him could have consequences. His behavior wasn't just frustrating, it was exhausting. Donna felt increasingly disrespected and devalued, questioning the sustainability of living with someone who claimed superiority simply because he was the husband. She realized that if things didn't change, she couldn't continue in this way. Walter needed to understand the impact of his actions, and Donna decided it was time for him to face the consequences of his domineering behavior. At that moment, I realized that dealing with Walter on top of my already stressful job would push my stress levels to their limit. So, I told him, "I'm really tired, I'm sorry, I'm going to rest in my room." Walter didn't appreciate my response and blocked my way, challenging me. "Wait, what's with that attitude towards your husband? I could kick you out right now if I wanted to. Do you think it's all right to upset your spouse like that?" He looked furious. It baffled me how he could act so authoritative without contributing financially and how easily he could distress me, yet he couldn't handle the slightest inconvenience himself. It was like dealing with a child's tantrum. "I'm sorry, but I'm exhausted. Please just try to understand," I replied, forcing a smile, no longer wanting to engage further. Walter sighed deeply and muttered, "You're such a disappointment as a wife." I didn't have the energy to argue. I simply repeated, "I'm sorry," and retreated to my room. Day by day, Walter's overbearing behavior wore me down, but I was too exhausted to confront him. Then, one day, I caught a severe cold, which the doctor diagnosed as a stress-induced fever. Immediately, I thought of Walter's constant pressure. I was so ill that I couldn't move, so I took a day off from work and could only lie in bed. When I informed Walter of my condition, he snapped, "A cold? That's just an excuse. Go to work. You're useless." His harsh words seemed to make my fever spike even higher. He declared, "I won't be taking care of you. This is your mess. Deal with it." So I was left alone in my room, moaning from the fever with no one to help. I was too weak to prepare anything for myself, and I didn't want to face Walter again for fear of more verbal abuse. My temperature reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The fever was so intense that my body was drenched in sweat. I couldn't even get up to change my soaked clothes. I lay there pondering how much easier things might be if I could just pass away. With these grim thoughts, I endured a painful night alone. Perhaps it was the fever talking, but in my heart, I knew something had to change. Throughout the night, as the sun disappeared and the stars took over the sky, a deep sense of loneliness and doubt overwhelmed me. I longed for Walter's support, not even to cure my fever, but just to bring me an ice pack, apply a cool compress, and ask if I was okay. Sadly, this was just a fantasy. Instead, the words I received from him were harsh and uncaring, cutting deep and stirring up new anxieties. I questioned why I was the only one suffering, what I had done wrong, and why things couldn't be smoother between us. Once these thoughts began, I couldn't hold back the tears. The pain was just too much. After 5 days of rest, my fever subsided enough for me to return to work. My colleagues and bosses expressed their concern, asking if I was truly okay to be back. Although I was still recuperating, I felt compelled to support our household financially and couldn't afford more time off. Their genuine concern touched me deeply, such a stark contrast to Walter's indifference, and nearly brought me to tears again. At this point, a voice inside me screamed that I could no longer deal with Walter's behavior. I was pushing myself too hard, ignoring the signs that this way of life was unsustainable. Deep down, I knew that I couldn't keep going like this without eventually collapsing from the strain. By now, my feelings for Walter had significantly diminished, yet I lacked the energy to contemplate a separation. Amid these tumultuous feelings, I trudged through my days, working hard, returning home exhausted, and catering to Walter's unpredictable demands. This had become my daily routine. Then, one day while I was trying to find a moment of peace in my room, Walter called out, wanting to discuss something serious. It had been a long time since we had a real conversation. Typically, Walter would make significant decisions unilaterally. With a heavy heart, I sat down for the discussion, fearing what might come next. To my shock, Walter, with unexpected enthusiasm, announced, "I'll let my parents live in this house. You can't even cook, so leave." The first word that slipped out of my mouth was, "What?" He continued, "You need to leave because you're living with my in-laws." I was stunned, unable to accept the reality of his selfish demands. The situation had reached a breaking point, and I realized something had to change. As Walter steered the conversation forward, he revealed his plans to change the ownership of our house, transferring it to his name and his parents'. He bluntly stated his intentions to divorce me and start a new life, declaring his decision final and immune to my opinions. I felt utterly disregarded, my feelings trampled under decisions made without my consent. Walter, inflated with his man-of-the-house ego, seemed only concerned with his desires. My heart sank as I realized the impossibility of continuing life with him. Ignoring my growing detachment, Walter jeered, "You love me so much, don't you? I know this is shocking coming from a husband you love so dearly, but I'm sorry, I just want to take care of my family. Please understand." His words, meant to sound considerate, felt more like a scolding. I wanted to shout that he was wrong. Any affection I once felt for Walter had evaporated, leaving behind only disbelief at his selfishness and regret for not severing ties sooner. Why hadn't I left him earlier? If I had, perhaps he wouldn't have had the opportunity to exploit and demean me so thoroughly. I even resented my past self for being too lenient with him. Seeing my visible distress, Walter misread my pain as lingering love, thinking I couldn't bear the thought of a divorce. But he was mistaken. My feelings for him had long since faded into nothing more than disdain for a man who wrongly believed I still cared. Determined to set things straight, I said firmly, "Fine then, I'll leave." Walter gasped, "What?" He hadn't anticipated my readiness to accept the divorce and move on. He needed to understand that the old me, who always bailed him out, was gone for good. From now on, whatever happened to Walter, he would face it without me because our relationship was over. Seeing my resolve, Walter stood shocked and frozen. I seized the moment to head to my room and pack the essentials. I knew I couldn't take larger items today and would need to arrange for movers later. As I began to pack, Walter hurried over, perhaps finally realizing the gravity of the situation. Walter approached me, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Are you sure about this? If we divorce, we'll be strangers." I smiled softly and replied, "I've already fallen out of love with you. Letting go feels like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders." Hearing this, Walter stood there, looking bewildered and lost. I nodded, thanked him for the years together, and walked out of the house. His worried expression lingered in my mind as I returned to my parents' home. Upon explaining everything to my parents, they initially reacted with fury at Walter's behavior, but soon calmed down, reassured by my resolve and the plan I had in place. I began to recuperate at my parents' home, taking the first steps by initiating the divorce proceedings. After I sent the divorce papers, Walter messaged me, "Are you sure about this? I don't know if it's really a good thing, but I don't have any feelings for you anymore. If we've gone this far, there's no turning back." His message concluded with a request to expedite the divorce. "I feel so much better now that you're gone, so fill out the divorce papers quickly." I replied, but received no response. A few days later, I received the completed divorce papers from Walter with his sections already filled out. I promptly completed my part and submitted it to the county office. Now, Walter and I were officially divorced. During the divorce, we divided our assets. Walter received the house, as he had insisted, so I transferred ownership to him and chose to move on. The house had never really felt like home to me. It was more of a burden. Instead, I sought alimony from Walter, which his parents initially covered since he wasn't working. However, he was now job hunting, likely planning to repay them once he secured employment. But as is often the case, reality doesn't always align with plans. A month after the divorce was finalized, I had moved out of my parents' home into a new place, enjoying a more peaceful life. Then I received a call from Walter. Honestly, it was annoying. I could guess why he was calling, but ignoring him might lead to more complications. So, knowing I'd have to address it sooner or later for the sake of my future, I answered the phone with a firm, "Hello, what do you want?" Completely fed up, I wanted him to get straight to the point. Reluctantly, I listened as he pleaded, "Please help me." His desperate tone made me chuckle. Walter was clearly in a tough spot, and while part of me felt distant, another part was mildly amused by the irony of his desperation. Walter's call caught me off guard. I hadn't expected things to have deteriorated so quickly. "Well, what's going on? You need to tell me the whole story," I replied, half amused by the situation. I suspected why Walter might be struggling, but I wanted him to lay it all out himself. With a hesitant voice and stumbling over his words, Walter began to explain. He had taken over the house after our divorce and managed it fine for a month. However, he now faced a rent payment he couldn't meet due to his unemployment. Desperate, he had asked my former parents-in-law, who were on a pension, for help. But the rent was much steeper than anyone anticipated, about $2,500, a sum they couldn't afford on their fixed income. My former in-laws were livid, accusing him of misleading them. "This isn't what we agreed to," they insisted, placing the blame squarely on Walter. Feeling lost and unsure, Walter called me nearly in tears. "I didn't realize the rent would be so high. The place is a mess now. What are you going to do about it?" Frustrated and overwhelmed, Walter was now trying to pin the blame on me. Admittedly, I hadn't discussed the specifics of the rent before our separation, but it was Walter's folly to assume responsibility for the house without understanding the financial commitments involved. He had pushed me away, treating me like an outsider, and now he was facing the consequences of his decisions. Despite this, he seemed unable to accept responsibility and reached out to me for help. I couldn't help but sigh at his audacity. Ignoring the strain in his voice, Walter continued urgently, "Please, I need your help. We can't keep going like this. I need you." His desperation was palpable. The rent due date had likely already passed, which meant they might be behind on payments. The landlord of that house had a reputation for being temperamental and strict about rent deadlines. I remember being warned repeatedly when I was still living there, never be late with the rent. If they missed a payment, they would face serious repercussions. Walter, having met the landlord a few times, knew exactly how intimidating they could be. His call was a last-ditch effort, driven by sheer desperation. When Walter called me pleading for help, he said, "Please, just cover the rent for 1 month. I don't have anyone else to turn to. You still care about me, right? If someone you care about is in trouble, you should help them out." His tone was still self-centered, as if he hadn't changed at all. I wanted to tell him straight that my feelings for him had long since faded. But instead, I held back and replied coldly, "I'm sorry, but I don't have any obligation to help you. You were the one who cut me off, and now you expect me to assist you when it's convenient for you. That's not fair." Walter tried to defend himself. "Please don't be so cold. I really can't handle this alone. Whether you still love me or not doesn't matter now. We were married once, right? Can't you help me out just this once?" "No, you were the one who left me. Even before that, my feelings for you had already cooled. It's been a long time since I stopped loving you," I responded firmly. Hearing Walter's dejected voice on the other end, he said, "I can't believe it," which struck a chord deep within me. For so long, I had endured everything. Even when Walter was selfish, took me for granted, or mistreated me, especially when I was sick, I stayed by his side, hoping to salvage our marriage. I worked tirelessly for the life we had, but this was the outcome. Why hadn't I left sooner when my love for him faded? Why didn't I distance myself earlier? These regrets flooded in, mingling with the anger I felt towards him. Walter never truly faced me. He never showed real concern, never protected me, and never embraced the idea of navigating life together as a team. All this time, he treated me like a maid, a mere money-making machine. Each time he acted this way, he seemed oblivious to my suffering. Yet now, despite all this being a result of his actions, he came pleading for help as if he were the victim. His self-centered attitude was repelling. "Please help me, I'm begging you. What about getting married again? Let's start over properly this time. I promise I'll never push you away again," Walter proposed desperately. I couldn't help but feel a mix of incredulity and annoyance. How could he think a simple plea for help could erase the years of neglect and misunderstanding? His desperation was evident, but so was the clarity of my decision not to fall back into the same pattern. I had moved on, and it was time for Walter to do the same. I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly at Walter's desperate suggestion. "Are you kidding me? All of this is the result of your actions. I've been trying to find peace in my way for a long time. I kept hoping you would face reality, and now you want me to start over with you, pretending none of that ever happened? Do you expect me to go back to those miserable days? That's never going to happen. I refused to return to that life no matter what." Emotions overwhelmed me, and tears started to flow. I couldn't tell if they were from anger or sadness. Walter remained silent on the other end, having nothing to say in response to my words. Unable to continue the conversation any longer, I simply said goodbye and hung up. Walter didn't call back, and to avoid hearing his voice ever again, I blocked his number. Later, I heard from mutual friends that Walter and his family were evicted from their home. Walter had tried to persuade my former in-laws to cover his rent, but they were furious, refusing his request and further upsetting the landlord. With no other options, they were forced to leave. Walter hasn't had much luck finding a full-time job and is now working part-time to make ends meet. Meanwhile, my former in-laws had to sell their house and are now crammed into a rundown apartment, all three of them together. Meanwhile, I've been deeply focused on my work, and my boss has even discussed a promotion with me. There's a possibility I might become the first female manager in our company, and I've been receiving admiration from both colleagues and juniors. Sometimes friends inquire if I'm thinking about getting married again. Honestly, after my past experiences, I have a rather negative view of marriage. The idea of dating or marrying again doesn't appeal to me right now, but life is long and there's no rush. Many people in this generation live their entire lives happily unmarried. What matters most to me is living a life without regrets and staying true to myself. With that in mind, I want to continue navigating life at my own pace, embracing whatever comes my way with strength and independence.